We're going to start learning the Morenu unit number 34, which is in the series of Kavod, ועונג, Shabbat, series that does not deal with the Avot Melacha themselves, also not the Drabanans of the Avot Melacha, but more broadly, Kavod, ועונג, Shabbat, things that have to do with the correct way of treating and doing Shabbat. As we say, this Shiur is for the Menucha of Sir Moses Montefiore and Sir Naim Dangur. So we're going to go into the question of commerce on Shabbat, which presumably is part of the issue of Kavod ועונג Shabbat. We're going to see shortly that it's a bit more than that. So the Mishnah says, and the Gemara explains, which means that in the old days, they didn't have a fridge, they didn't have a freezer. If you wanted fresh meat, you had to shecht it on Yantiv. The best thing to do is early in the morning, Yantiv morning, you shecht an animal and everyone gets a piece. But you're going to take a big ox and you're going to shecht it, you're going to have a few hundred kilos of meat. You're going to have to split it up between the people. So you take it out to, you take your ox out to the shul and you say, okay, who wants the entrecote? How much are you going to pay? Who wants the, etc., right? So that you're not allowed to do on Yantiv, and surprisingly also not on Shabbos. I guess on Yantiv you have what to do with the ox. On Shabbos there's nothing to do with it, right? So Rashi says in Poskim Damim Demekach Umemkar b'Shabbat u'v'Yom Tov Asur. Right, Rambam as well. And Yimnim shein Poskim Dema b'Yom Tov kigon she'yomru be'emazo b'asara zuzim nikachena la'asara anashim zuzu l'kol adam, etc. In other words, you shouldn't be doing the math. You shouldn't be doing that cheshbon. Hold on one sec. Sorry. Beseder. So, why not? Says the Gemara, Tamamai, why not? Why can't you do this? Gzera shemeichtov, lo makdishim velo ma'arichin velo machrimim, gzera mishum mekach umemkar. So, here the Gemara says the issue with lehimanot is because you might write it down. The issue with hekdesh and things that are like hekdesh, haracha and hachrama are also like hekdesh, is gzera mishum mekach umemkar, because you're not allowed to practice commerce on Shabbat, right? Now, just interesting that in the context of lehimanot on the behema, which sounds very much like the marketplace, there the Gemara says you might write. When it comes to hekdesh, they say, well, you're not allowed to have commerce, right? In other words, that which looks like the sale is asur because you might write, but this which has to do with hekdesh is because you're not allowed, right? Presumably I'd expect them to say, why can't you nimna on the behema? Why can't you have this sale on Yantiv? Because you're not allowed gzera mishum mekach umemkar, because you have to sell things on Yantiv, right? So Rashi writes about gzera mishum mekach umemkar, delemekach umemkar damu shemotzim mirshuto l'rshut hekdesh. Right, hekdesh is like selling something, right? I'm giving something to Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's mine now, and then becomes Kadosh Baruch Hu's, right? Now, okay, fine, but who says mekach umemkar is prohibited? It says one of two options. Mina mikra dichtiv imtzoch efzecha v'daber davar. Right, so this would presumably be imtzoch efzecha, that you're not supposed to work on Shabbos and Yantiv. Inami mekach umemkar ati l'idei ktivat shetrei mechira. We're not going to go into the question of the chad gzera right now, but it's just interesting that Rashi does say, well, there are two ways of looking at this. One way is that doing business is asur because you're not supposed to do business on Shabbos and Yantiv. That's it. That's what the pasuk is alluding to. Alternatively, there's an issue that you might end up writing, right? Just presumably this Rashi is sitting on these two sides of the Gemara, right? The Gemara itself mentioned in the context of lehimanot shemeichtov and not mekach umemkar, and then later on says mekach umemkar as standalone isur. So Rashi says, well, those are two ways of looking at it, right? The Rambam over there, asur lilvot ulehalvot, gzera shemeichtov, so you're not to lend, right, or to have money. because you might write it down. All these things are all shemei chtov. Similarly, in danim b'Shabbat v'lo choltzin v'lo me'abin v'lo mekadshin gzera shemei chtov in makdishim v'lo ma'arechim v'lo chomim mipnei shu kemekach umemkar, which is very much like the Gemara. But once again, mipnei shu kemekach umemkar, but why can't you limkol, which he said mentioned right, liknot v'limkol, right? Why not? That's also gzera shemei chtov. Right, so presumably the way it works is like this. I think the Rambam means the following: there's a gzeira, you might write things down when you sell, but hekdesh isn't really selling, but it's still prohibited because it's like selling. And then you might ask, so you see what I'm saying? In other words, why are you not allowed to sell or buy on Shabbos and Yom Tov? Because you might write it down. You're not allowed to do other things that are also moving things from one what's called ba'alut, right? From one property to another, right? You're not to exchange and move around property on Shabbos and Yom Tov either, even in ways that are not really commerce because it looks like commerce, right? And then you might ask, and then going back to Rashi, Rashi says, so this is a double gzeira, right? There's a double gzeira, right? The first gzeira is on the mekach umemkar. The second gzeira is you're not to do hekdesh because it's like mekach umemkar, right? Why usually we don't do a double gzeira. You have one gzeira and that's it. You're not going to make another gzeira because you might do another gzeira. In other words, if you say you're not to do hekdesh, why not? Because it's like selling and buying. Meaning you might buy and sell things. Say, okay, and why is that a problem? Oh, because you might write it down. We usually don't take two steps away. Rashi says, kol achad gzera, meaning, I'll just give this simple, there's in the Harchavot here, there's another explanation, but I'll give the simple explanation. When we need to define what do we mean when we say no sell, that you're not to sell on Shabbos and Yom Tov? What we mean is move property from one ownership, move ownership from one person to another. That's what we mean when we say mekach umemkar. Though you're right, normally mekach umemkar means buying and selling in the marketplace. But it includes giving a present, it includes doing hekadesh, it includes anything that moves ownership from one person to another. So that's just about how the gzeira, so just to sum that point up, it seems in the Rambam, I think the pshat is, there's a gzeira on mekach umemkar because you might write. Now, why are you not allowed? Now, how do we define mekach umemkar? The definition of mekach umemkar is ownership, is passing ownership from one person to another. So, based on this, it seems that the root of this whole issue, the Isur begins from the gzeira because you might write, which presumably means that it's something that it was a Chazal ordained gzeira. It didn't exist in the Torah. It didn't exist before Chazal came around and made it and prohibited this. But it looks like it did exist earlier. We see already in Amos. Shimuzot hasha'afim evyon v'lashbit anyei aretz lemor matay yavor hachodesh v'nashbir hashever v'hashabbat v'niftecha bar להקטין איפה ולהגדיל שקל ולעוות מאזני מרמה, לקנות בכסף דלים ואביון בעבור נעליים ומפל בר נשביר. Now, Amos was mostly dealing with issues of the richer people abusing their power. That was Amos's whole, almost the entire book talks about that, the abuse of the poor people. But over here specifically, he says, when will Shabbat end and we can open up our marketplace again, right? Right? Until Shabbat is over, we can't sell our stocks, which means, right, we can't sell our goods until Shabbat is over, which assumes that already in Amos's time, the assumption was that no one would buy or sell things on Shabbos. Now, Yirmiyahu is more extreme. He says, "Kol ma'al Hashem yishamu b'nefshotechem ve'al tis'u masah b'yom haShabbat ve'haveti b'sha'ar Yerushalayim ve'lo totzi'u masah mitbatechem b'yom haShabbat v'chol malacha lo ta'asu v'kiddashtem et yom haShabbat ka'asher tziviti et avotechem." Now, here again, al tis'u masah, what does he mean by tis'u masah? Does he mean carrying per se, or does he mean does he mean selling? It sounds more like you take it to the market. Now, maybe you can say, well, it's the issue of carrying Bishut HaRabim. All right. But it sounds like the problem with, there was an issue with having the market running unto itself. Now, Nehemiah goes more extreme. In Nehemiah, we see this more extremely. בימים ההם ראיתי ביהודה דורכים גיטות בשבת ומביאים הערימות ועומסים על החמורים ואף יין נביאים ותאנים וכל מסע ומביאים מירושלים בערב השבת והעיד ביום מכרם ציד. והצורים ישבו בה מביאים דג וכל מכר ומוכרים בשבת לפני יהודה וירושלים. והריבה את חורי יהודה ואומרה להם, מה הדבר הרע הזה אשר אתם עושים? מחללים את יום השבת. הלא כה עשו אבותיכם ויבא אלוהינו עלינו את כל הרע הזאת ועל העיר הזאת ואתם מוסיפים חרון על ישראל לחלל את השבת. Now, what is the Chilul Shabbat we're referring to? Again, once again, you can look at this in two ways. You can say what they were doing is they were dolchim gidot b'Shabbat. They were creating wine on Shabbos. Mevi'im ha'aremot ve'omsim al hachamurim. So they were doing the issur of using animals on Shabbat, which is asur, right? Or carrying on Shabbos. But the context all seems to be the market. They can say, well, if you have a market running, eventually people are going to be doing many Yisurim, right? That's one way of looking at it, right? But it sounds like the market was an issue unto itself. And that, again, it was Nehemiah and also Yirmiyahu and also Amos. Amos just shows that there was a minhag not to have the market on Shabbos. You could say, all right, that's a minhag. Yirmiyahu, you can say he's only referring to carrying, and the only reason people bothered carrying is because they wanted the market to continue running on Shabbat. Nehemiah is talking directly about the market. Again, on the other hand, you can say, if you have the market running, many issues will arise, right? And then Chazal chose one. The one issue that they chose was, well, you might write on Shabbos. But writing is just one example out of many. It's one way of looking at it, right? Well, if you're going to have the market run on Shabbos, you're going to run out of wine, and you're going to have to take it from your gut. You're going to have to start doing Isur Dasha on Shabbat, etc. Right? So once again, is the point the market is a problem on Shabbos regardless, or is the point that there are many issues that will come up, many Yisurim will happen if the market runs on Shabbat. Now he solved this problem by saying, "Vayikashat tzalalu sharei Yerushalayim lifnei Shabbat, va'omera v'yisageru hadlatot va'omera asher lo yiftachu mad achar Shabbat u'min ha'ara ye'imati al ha'sharim lo yavo masa b'yom Shabbat v'yalinu aruchlim u'achrei kol merkam mimkar mechutz Yerushalayim pam u'shtayim." And he closed up the city. He closed up the city so that the people coming to market would not be able to come. Va'ida b'hem ואמרה להם, מדוע אתם לנים נגד החומה? אם תשנו יד אשלח בכם מן העת ההיא, לא באו בשבת. I stopped them from coming, I made them stop coming on Shabbat. Now, again, I just, right, once again, there are two ways of reading these psukim. One way is, people were doing many different isurim because the market was running, and he realized if I block the market, it'll save people from doing many isurim. It's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that the market is a problem unto itself. Right? Now, in the Mechilta, it says, "Ushmartem et hayom hazeh ledorotechem." Lama ne'emar? V'alo kvar ne'emar, kol malacha lo ya'aseh behem. So, Shmirat Shabbat. Beseder, we know about Shmirat Shabbat. Ein yele dvarim shem mishum melacha. Dvarim shem mishum shvut minayin. Telu lomar, Ushmartem et hayom hazeh la'avi dvarim shem mishum shvut, which is very surprising. Shvut, presumably, is drabanan. So here I have a pasuk that tells me that they're Isurei Drabanan. The pasuk tells me they're Isurei Drabanan. Just a complete side note here. I just happened to, I'm learning about Shemitah. I'm preparing the pages on Shemitah now. So over there's a similar Maharal. Rashi writes, Bashviti shmetena untashta. Rashi writes untashta and gives a few examples. Right, what is tishmetenu untashta? Rashi gives a few examples of isurei drabanan, of melachot drabanan. And everyone, the Ramban asks, well, what? But you can't say the pasuk is teaching us a drabanan, can you? So the Maharal says, that's exactly what Rashi was doing. Because Baruch Hu says, well, you're these are 4 melachot you're not allowed to do on Shemitah that are deraisa. There might be a couple other deraisa. I'm not going to look at that right now, obviously. Apart from that, Hashem says, Tishmetenu tashta. What is Tishmetenu tashta? Says the Maharal, Hashem told Chazal, figure out how to more broadly notesh the karka. Now, and then Rav Kook explains, every specific Isur you do on Shemitah will still be Drabanan. Any specific of those Isur will be Drabanan. But if you generally continue working the fields in ways even that the Torah didn't necessarily say this specific thing is prohibited. But if you just continue working your fields in all the Drabanan ways, that is an Isur Deraisa of Untashta. And the very, very similar thing we have in the Ramban right here. Right, so it's one thing to say, here are a bunch of melachot you're not allowed to do on Shemitah, and then there's the more broadly, untashta, you have to untash the karka, you have to leave it alone. Now, if you do specific melacha, tzeder, if you now water your plants, it's only drabana, it's not doraisa. But if you're working the field consistently in drabanan ways, then you do an isur doraisa. That's basically what the Ramban and the Ritva say right over here. About Shabbos, not about Shemitah. נראה לי שהמדרש הזה לומר שנסתווינו מן התורה להיות לנו מנוחה ביום טוב, אפילו מדברים שאינם מלאכה. לא שיטרח כל היום למדוד התבואות, לשקול הפירות והמתנות, ולמלא החביות יין, ולפנות הכלים, וגם האבנים מבית לבית וממקום למקום, ומתי עיר מוקפת חומה ודלתות, נעולות בלילה, יהיו עומסים על החמורים, ואף יין וענבים ותאנים וכל מסע, יביאו ביום טוב. Why is the Rambam giving this example? Based on Nehemiah, right? Rabbi was giving Nehemiah's example, saying, if only we can solve the tiltul issue, right, the carrying in Rishut Arabim issue, if we only solve all the rudimentary issues, you could have the marketplace work normally on Shabbos and Yantiv, right? There's no problem. Right? So don't charge them. השולחנים על שולחנם, והזהובים לפניהם, והפועלים משכימים למלאכתן, ומזכירים עצמם לאכול, ככל הדברים האלו וכיוצא בהם. So the market will continue working on Shabbos as usual. I mean, obviously not during Corona times, I'm saying, at other times. The market can continue working as usual on Shabbat. הותרו הימים הטובים האלה, ואפילו השבת עצמה, שבכל זה אין בהם משום מלאכה. So really, you could get away with doing all your work on Shabbos and Yantiv, right? So people like Yaakov, people like me, who work mostly in writing, most of what they do is write, so we have a problem. But people but if you run a store, so don't write anything on Shabbos Yantiv, just only sell things, right? You still need to write things down, so do that after Shabbos, fine. You have a lot of other things that you're going to have to do that after Shabbos and Yantiv. לכך אמרה תורה שבתון שיהיה יום שביתה ומנוחה, לא יום טורח, וזהו פירוש טוב ויפה. I like that, right? That when the Torah says, when the Midrash says, "Shmartem et hayom hazeh la'avid dvarim she'em mishum shvut," right? The Torah is telling us there are two issues. One is the specific melachot. Specific list of 39 melachot you're not allowed to do on Shabbos and Yantiv. Fine. I mean, Yantiv, there are a few, that's right. Yantiv, it's more like 33. But so, no, fewer. Right? 39 on Shabbos, about 30 on Yantiv. And those are the specific melachot that each one of those is an Isur Deraisa. But that's one issue. Then there's another issue, which is Shvut. You just need to not be doing business on Shabbos and Yantiv. So if I sell one item to someone on Shabbos, that's an Isur Drabanan, Gzera Shemeich Tov. But if I run the market, if I run my store on Shabbos, that's an Isur Deraisa of Shabbaton. That's similar to what the Ramban, the Ritva explains. The Ramban's Talmud explains this. Bram tzarichat lemeida. The kol meida amrina bekol duchta shvut de Rabbanan. Lalva memor she'emen shvut min haTorah klal. דאם כן נמצאת שבת ככל מן התורה, שאחרי פתוחות ואוצרות תבואה ויין, מטלטלין חפצים מבית לבית, דרך כרמלית, מועדים ושוקלים ומונים, ואינו בדין שאסרה התורה הוצאה כגוגרת, והתירה העמל הגדול הזה, שאם כן אין זה יום מנוחה. You could work very, very hard on Shabbos. You could, without transgressing any Isur Melacha, any of the 39 Melachot. you can do a lot of work. כך עיקרן של דברים, כי בכלל מצוות עשה שבות של תורה, לשבות ממלאכות. יש לשבות מכל שבות, כי בכלל מצוות עשה שבות של תורה, לשבות ממלאכות, יש לשבות מכל שבות, דרך כלל של לעשות שבת ככל. More broadly. אלא בכל פרט ופרט, כי עבד לי וזהיר באידך, דלא אבי שבת ככל, אבי שבות דרבנן, as long as you keep the rest of Shabbos, you only do, so if you carry something that's muktzah, if you sell one item, if you give a present, all these things that are asur midrabanan, you do it once in Isur Drabanan. But if you do it many times, if that's something that you're doing consistently on Yontiv, on Shabbos, then you've turned Shabbat into a day that's not a day of rest. Then you've turned Shabbat into a day of work, and that's an Isur D'oraisa. נמצא שיש לשבות עיקר מן התורה, לפיכך העמידו בחכמים דבריהם במקומות הרבה לדחות מצווה של תורה, וזו מרגלית שבידינו מרבנו הרמב"ן מפי מורנו. Okay. Now, the Rambam actually says something not quite as explicitly, but quite similar. נאמר בתורה תשבות, אפילו מדברים שאינם מלאכה, חייב לשבות מהם. ודברים הרבה הן שאסור חכמים משום שבות, מעין דברים אסורים מפני שהם דומים למלאכות, מעין דברים אסורים גזירה שמהווה מעין איסור סקילה. Now, right, the Rambam, you'll say, is only quoting the Medrash, right? What the Rambam is doing, he's saying, apart from the other melachot, there's another thing called tishbot. If you're going to carry muktzah around all day, so if you carry muktzah once, it's Isur Drabana. But if that's something you're going to do, if you're going to be schlepping if you're going to be sorting out your house, if you're going to be emptying your boxes, if you're going to be working on Shabbos, that's an Isur D'oraisa already, even though every specific action you've done is only Drabana. That's the Rambam's point here. The Maggid Mishnah explains, כוונת רבינו היא שהתורה אסרה פרטי המלאכות המבוארות על פי הדרך שנתבהרו ענייניהן ושיעוריהן, ועדיין, even after the Torah gave us a list of 39 melachot, as we said, based on this week's parsha, a list of 39 melachot, and each one specifically, Isur Karet, Isur Skila. עדיין, היה אדם יכול להיות עמל בדברים שאינם מלאכות, כל היום. You could spend all day doing all these non-melacha things on Shabbos. לכך אמרה תורה, תשבות, ככתב הרמב"ן, בפירוש התורה שלו, והחכמים ואסור הרבה דברים. And I think this is true not only about commerce, I think it's also true about the things we've learned in the last couple of units, right? If I go and I discuss business with people, right? If I'm a businessman, I have a lot of meetings. I need to have many meetings with many people, right? And obviously making a phone call on Shabbos isn't asur mid'oraisa either. I could spend all day talking, I can say Shabbos will be my day of meetings. I'll have all my business meetings on Shabbos. I'll spend all day having all my business meetings. And then, right, it can be very efficient. Right? I can spend all day on Shabbos having meetings. I can spend all day on Shabbos, as we saw at the end of the last unit, right? Washing dishes. All these things I don't have time to do during the week. Right? All these things that are asur, that are only a drabanan issue, can become doraisa if that's what I spend my Shabbat doing. Have a look at the Khatam Sofer, sums this up. מפורש בנחמיה, דיושב בחנות ומוכר ולוקח, הוא מחלל שבת. כמה שכתוב בפירוש. Right? He explains Nehemiah. I showed two ways of reading Nehemiah. He reads it the second way that says, doing business is chilul Shabbat. That's what Nehemiah is talking about. האומנם נמצא בדברי חכמי התלמוד מקח וממכר בשבת אסור מדרבנן. We learned in the Gemara that it's only a drabanan issue, not a doraisa issue. היינו באקראי, ניכר דבר מחברו. והמאכל, שום דבר בארעי ואקראי, זה אינו בכלל דברי נחמיה הנ"ל, ואסרו התלמודים. אבל הקובע מקח וממכר, הוא פותח חנותו בשבת וסוחר ומזכיר, והוא מחלל שבת בפרהסיה. So to sum that up, we saw that the issue of selling on Shabbos, of having commerce on Shabbos, is drabanan shemeichtov. We saw in the psukim that there are many other issues that could come up if you're going to run the market on Shabbos. But all those drabanan things are only if they're done once, done b'akrai, as the Khatam Sofer says. If you do it consistently, if you're working on Shabbos, that already becomes an Isur D'oraisa.